Now, after Baha'u'llah died, he was succeeded by his son Abdul Baha, who brought it to the United States. He was succeeded by Shoghi Effendi, whose tomb is at the international headquarters, which is in Haifa, Israel. Recently I was in Israel, visited Haifa, delivered a lecture there, although not under the auspices of the Baha'is. I think I'm persona non grata there, but I had an opportunity to deliver a lecture, at any rate, to some busloads of pilgrims on the subject of what Baha'ism was. Its history is an offshoot of Islam. Its basic theology, very, very simple. What is it? That Moses, Christ, Buddha, Zoroaster, Confucius, Mohammed, and finally Baha'u'llah are all manifestations of the supreme divinity. And that Jesus was the light for his time, Mohammed for his time, but Baha'u'llah, the glory of Allah, the glory of God, is now dispensing truth to the entire world. The 9 great world religious leaders, the 9-sided temple in Wilmette, Illinois, the Baha'is' fixation with the figure 9 and with 19 is quite significant in their history. I think perhaps documentation is necessary to show what a great debt Baha'i owes to Islam. And if you can understand this, I think it's possible to come to grips with Baha'i theology. Because the theology, though it is simple in basic structure, becomes complex when it gets into its philosophic application. And I want to quote directly from the sources themselves because I think that's only fair to represent the Baha'is as they themselves teach it, not as others would represent them. One of the claims that's constantly made against Christianity is that we misrepresent other people's religion. I think the best thing for us to do is let them represent themselves. And therefore I'm going to quote them. What do they believe? The oneness of God and the oneness of religion. The oneness of mankind. An independent search after truth. All prejudices must be abandoned. Religious, color, national, class, sexual, and personal prejudices. International peace must be established. An international auxiliary language, Esperanto, must be established. Education for all. Equality for the sexes. Abolition of industrial slavery. Abolition of wealth and poverty. I don't quite know how we're going to manage that one. I've been trying to think it through for 20 years, how we can abolish wealth and poverty simultaneously. Does present somewhat of a dichotomy in logic and philosophy, but it's there. And finally, personal holiness. Work in the spirit of service. For the Baha'i is worship. Now these are noble goals. The oneness of God and the oneness of religion, the oneness of mankind. To search after truth, the abandonment of prejudice, the quest for peace, a language that everybody can understand, education for everybody, equality, all of the things that men would normally seek after. But going beyond these things, how does Baha'ism and its structural theology compare with Christianity? To me, this is very important. May I, at this juncture, invoke Bertrand Russell. Now, I recognize that this won't really register on some people initially, but I'm going to invoke him anyhow because my training is in philosophy. I studied for my master's degree under Sidney Hook at New York University, who was one of the foremost emergent naturalists in the world. And I spent 3.5 years of my life learning why I should not believe in God, which thoroughly confirmed me in my faith in Jesus Christ. One of the surest ways to become a devout Christian is to get battered from pillar to post and to learn ultimately the truth, that not only is the intellect to be satisfied, but what must be first satisfied is the quest of the soul. And God will take care of the mind. First, the soul must be at peace with God, and then the mind. And too often we try and get the mind and the logical system in order first, and we ignore the soul. And then suddenly everything starts to come apart. Well, under Dr. Hook, I had my baptism of fire. Now, we'll never forget one day Dr. Hook, who was Jewish, being faced with this question by someone in the class who was theological eclectic, which is essentially what Baha'ism is. And Dr. Hook went to the blackboard and he said, I have to agree here, though I seldom do, with Dr. Bertrand Russell. And everybody laughed because he was an emergent naturalist, and of course Russell held an entirely different school of philosophy. He was essentially an empiricist, and their views conflicted in a number of places. And so he drew a circle on a board and made it into a pie, and then he wrote in each one of the pies the name of the religions of the world: Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Confucianism, and he went around the circle, ended with Judaism and Christianity. Dr. Hook, who is an agnostic by his profession and an atheist by his methodology, which you'll find most professing agnostics are atheists. They are agnostics who say we do not know, but they act as if they had received a divine revelation. That there is no God. After he had done this on the board, he said, now, I would like to invoke the law of non-contradiction. A cannot at the same time be non-A. Granted, gentlemen? Everybody said, yes, of course. First-year student in logic will know that. Gotta be true. Obviously, everybody falls down and worships before the four formal laws of logic. The law of the Medes and the Persians, which alters not. And so Dr. Hook said, now, either all the religions of the world are wrong, or one of them's right. Bertrand Russell, Why I Am Not a Christian, and he quoted the page. Everybody laughed again. He said, now, without getting too sticky in this matter, he said, and you know my position. Everybody did. He taught a course in metaphysics, which was laughingly known in grad school as the course in which Dr. Hook buries God. It's called metaphysics. The name itself was humorous since he was teaching the course. Well, he then proceeded to go through each one of the religions. I didn't know how well informed he was on these religions until he got finished. And he proceeded to show internal contradiction in theological structure on the definition of the nature of God. He never bothered with anything else, just the nature of God. And he showed how Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, all derived from the same source, basically monotheistic, were opposed logically and theologically to all other forms of religion, and showed the internal contradiction structurally as he went, to all of them. Then when he got finished, he eliminated Islam because he said it was the later of the three and was derived from Judaism and Christianity, an amalgamation of both and not worthy in his mind to be considered. And then he said there are only two left, Judaism and Christianity. By Judaism, he said, I mean orthodoxy. Because if you're going to be a Jew, orthodoxy is Judaism. Coming from Dr. Hook, who had no Judaism at all, that came as quite a revelation. And he ended by saying, since Judaism and Christianity are essentially agreed on everything, but dietary laws and the identity of Jesus of Nazareth, he said, we are left with the conclusion that the Christians are always telling us about, namely, that Christianity is the logical fulfillment of Judaism, and that there must be, even if that's not true, only one God. And there was dead silence in the classroom. And he said, I'm open for discussion on the subject. And there was no discussion on the subject. Dr. Hook had, with Bertrand Russell, buried everything by a systematic